midnight screams.
The Mandela effect was never anything more than a little creepy to me. A scary thought, maybe, but never one I dwelled on for more than 5 minutes. I mean, to be honest, I didn't even know what it was until college. I wasn't the type for conspiracy theories or ghost stories. I wish I had remained ignorant. It started in my biology class. I was 20, and it was near the end of the fall semester at FSU. My professor, Dr. Arnold, gave us our final early because she was a conscientious instructor and didn't want us cramming for all our classes at once. She figured giving us our final before everyone else would let us study for her class without distraction and then study for our others with less stress. I loved her for that. But a part of me wishes she had never decided to bless us in that way. On the last day of class, most people were absent. Everyone knew it wasn't really important, and people were just ready for the semester to be over. Still, some of us were bound by scholarship attendance policies, and others just out of courtesy to Dr. Arnold came to class anyway. I was there because I loved her class. Another hour and 15 minutes of her lecturing was fine by me, and hey, what else did I have to do? The doctor started class a little differently than usual. We normally began with a current event from the week, some news about GMOs, the critical decline in the giraffe population, or something else biology related. But today, we were looking at an old article, and it had nothing to do with biology. It was about the Mandela effect. I had never heard of it. Most of us hadn't, but she was passionate about it. The old woman was usually brisk in her teaching, annoyed when someone disagreed with her. But my God, she was electric today. All right, for those of you thoughtful enough to show up today, I have a treat for you. I'm going to teach you something you'll probably never forget. Or maybe you'll just brush it off. I don't. No. But if it interests you as much as it does me, I'm sure you'll be happy you came today. Can anyone tell me when Nelson Mandela died? Everyone looked around, confused. Then a girl raised her hand. He died a couple of years ago, I think in 2012. The doctor nodded slowly, scanning the room as if waiting for something, and she found it. Seagrave. She pointed at a boy in the class. Why do you look so puzzled? Oh, I thought he died a long time ago, in the 92nds or something, in prison. She smiled, delighted by this answer. So, class, is Amanda right? Or is Seagrave right? Everyone seemed confused. Most of us were like me, and really had no clue, but a few agreed with Seagrave and another one with Amanda. Amanda, Dr. Arnold praised. You are very close. He died from a respiratory infection on the 5th of December 2013. But why do some of you think he died in prison in the early 92nds? Many of you did. The doctor motioned for one of the boys to explain. Where did you draw that conclusion from? I could have sworn we learned about it in 7th grade, in my world history class. It was part of Black History Month. Yeah, me too, one of the girls nodded. Black History Month when I was a kid. He died, and then there was that thing about his wife trying to sue some company. Excellent. Dr. Arnold was more pleased than ever. You all remember this being documented, but strangely, it never was. Look it up. Go on Google and search Nelson Mandela death. You'll find nothing about the 92nds or prison. Even type in Nelson Mandela prison death. You won't find the CNN articles or the documentary about his funeral that aired all over the world. You won't find his supposed cause of death. And you won't find anything about the riots in South African cities that followed, because it never happened. This confused me a little. Most of the class was silent and waiting for the doctor to elaborate. It's a phenomenon called the Mandela effect, she smiled. A paradox, an unusual mystery of the universe for which there is no sound scientific explanation. And from that point, the hour and 15 minutes flew by. I thought only 5 minutes had passed when it was time for class to end. It truly astonished me. It was basically the theory that Nelson Mandela had died in prison in the 90 seconds. But then, something happened that somehow reversed this event, and he lived for several more decades before dying again in 2013. While some of us don't remember Mandela dying in the 20th century, others do. They remember the press releases, the emotional speech from his widow, but it all vanished from the universe when this event took place and rewrote history. And all that's left is this large collective memory, people who know how he died, and somehow all remember the same thing, but it's wrong. I myself don't remember being told Mandela died in the 90 seconds, but so many did, and still do. There are two theories behind it. The first, and less popular one, is time travel. They say someone went back in time and altered an event just slightly, but it created a ripple effect that led to something changing drastically. Here's a made-up example. Bob marries Sally. Bob and Sally met in the town center on some day in August of 2005. Bob's dog had just been hit by a car and he was grieving. And when he saw Sally walking her dog, he couldn't help but walk over and talk to her. Soon they fell in love and got married. Well, then Jake goes back in time to that same town and around that same time. Jake is driving down the street around the time Bob's dog gets hit. But since Jake is driving, and he's ahead of the car that hits Bob's dog, and since Jake is a better driver, he stops and never hits it. The dog runs to Bob, perfectly healthy. So now when Bob goes to the town center, he thinks little of it when he sees Sally walking her dog, and they never say a word to each other. They each marry someone else, and now their son, who could have cured cancer or something, never exists. But time travel is supposedly completely fictional and unlikely. The more popular theory is that there are several universes, all alternate, and sometimes they brush shoulders, or basically cut each other off like two cars in a very minor accident. A fender bender. Universe A rear-ends Universe B, and pretty much everything stays the same. Except now, Universe A needs a new bumper. Well, literally, there is now something between Universe A and Universe B that has been swapped. Nelson Mandela lives to 2013 and dies of a respiratory infection, not in prison in the 90 seconds. And now everyone in Universe B thinks he died of a lung infection instead of in an African prison. This is the popular theory. After Dr. Arnold's class, I looked more into it, and there were other examples. Take the Berenstain Bears, for instance. We all read those books as kids, or most of our parents read them to us. So, without looking, how is their name spelled? Berenstain? Berenstain? Which is it? If you said Berenstein, you're one of thousands of others who would bet their house that you're right, but you're wrong. It was never spelled that way. And what about Curious George? Does he have a tail? How is the thinker posed? Is his fist pressed against his head, or is his hand uncurled, loose against his cheek, with his fingers extending to his chest? Curious George has no tail, and the thinker is in the latter pose. These things seem silly, but if they're wrong, why do so many people believe them to be true? I myself have my own theory for the Berenstain Bears and Curious George. When you read the name Berenstain, it looks Jewish or German, and like many Jewish or German last names, you think it ends with Stein instead of Stain. For example, Goldstein, Perlstein, Einstein. We all know that name. Berenstain doesn't look right, and over time, our minds replace the A with an I. Same with Curious George. He's a monkey. Of course we think he has a tail. He's even often pictured hanging from a vine, head down and ass up, as if he were hanging by his tail. This is more like the power of suggestion. Through external factors, our memories of these simple things have been altered. But then you have the thinker, King Tut's burial mask, and of course, Nelson Mandela. If the thinker is truly posing with his hand relaxed, uncurled, pressed against his cheek, obscuring his knuckles, why do we remember his hand completely balled up and placed on his head? And not just us, but popular cartoons misdraw it too? Why do so many make that same mistake? And King Tut's burial mask. On top of the mask, right between the eyes, what is there? There is a figure there, an animal to be exact. For those of you who think snake, obviously, you're like me. But you are wrong, at least partially. There is a snake and a bird that looks so strange and out of place on the mask that I can't look at it without shaking my head. It can't be two animals. It looks ridiculous. Go on Google and see for yourself. I remember in 6th grade, I had a world history book with that burial mask on the cover. I looked at it every day. Hell, when I nodded off in class, that's where my eyes fell, the cover of that book resting on my desk. I never saw that bird. I thought maybe it was just the angle, but the bird is so prominent that it's impossible not to see unless the mask is completely turned away from you, which it never, Island. And if it were, you couldn't see the snake either. I'm not the only one who remembers it that way. Popular cartoons misdraw it all the time, but there has always been a bird on it since 1323. B. C. Enough of my rambling. You might be wondering what all of this has to do with me. See, after Dr. Arnold's class that day, I couldn't stop thinking about this. I was so terrified by it, so morbidly fascinated that it occupied my mind. I felt like a victim of it, but it wasn't some huge epiphany for me, a life-changing philosophy. Anyway, after all, I was too busy studying to reflect on it regularly. But all of that changed when I sat down for breakfast with my friend Asher a week later. Asher and I have been friends since the 1st grade. We met at Tawas City Christian Academy, Michigan, in a town of less than 10,000 people. It was always cold, bleak, and gray, and quiet. You could see the whole town from a 5-story building. There were miles and miles of abandoned cornfields, and the only real moneymaker in town was a small marina where fishing took place. I later discovered that in other countries, Tawas City, Michigan, was known as the bird-watching capital of the world. Supposedly, a large array of birds migrated there, and it was a great place for bird watching. I never noticed that. All I can remember are the gray, snowy skies, the silent cornfields, and the feeling that if the place was wiped off the face of the earth, no one would ever notice. The public school was small, of course, but the private school, it was nearly non-existent. There were 15 people in my class, 16 including the teacher, or at least I thought so. I'm starving. My stomach's practically eating itself. Asher sighed, walking ahead of me into the diner. It was early on a Saturday morning, and it was finals week, and we had been studying like madmen. We thought our day would be spent doing what it always was, a mixture of relentless studying and fighting off the temptation to buy Adderall, which was pretty popular on campus around that time. But my day would be nothing like that. We sat down in our usual booth. His hair was bright red and messy as always. He was a redhead and a troublemaker too. He was a prankster and barely passed his classes. He was here for the booze and the girls, and his grades reflected that. But as close friends do, I forced him to study and pass. The diner, though, was a no-study zone. All mentions of class and exams were banned at the diner. Here we were to clear our minds of it all. The last time we met, I had talked so much about the Mandela effect, he wanted to puncture his own eardrums, so I tried not to bring it up today. I'm telling you, he sipped his coffee. When this is all over, we're going to party hard. Hard, Zen. I don't want to remember where I am when I wake up that morning. I chuckled. Yeah, for sure. Do you ever wish we were back at Tawas Christian? I mean, not back in Tawas City, but just those classes. We thought they were so hard. We both laughed. Dude, were we wrong? Yeah, that was a whole other universe, man. A cakewalk compared to now. And there were only 14 of us, unless you count Miss Davis. That's crazy. 14? I thought there were 15. He looked at me, confused. Nah, man, 14. Me, you, Aaron, Angel, Tyler Mahoney, Zach. Oh, that quiet girl, Grayson, Elizabeth Norman, that kid. I don't remember his real name, but we called him Taz. We called him Taz because he talked so fast, no one had a clue what the hell he was saying. I chuckled, remembering him. That's Brian Reed, Amy, the twins George and Jordan Reynolds, and that geek, Zealand. And then Miss Davis, that's 15 counting her. And Eve, he squinted. Who? Eve. The shy girl, remember? Tiny, blonde hair, brown eyes, didn't talk to anyone. He shook his head. That's everyone, dude. There were 14 of us. No, man, I replied. There was Eve. I was waiting for you to say her name. He just stared at me as if I was telling him bread was a liquid. Asher, are you fucking with me? Stop it. I'm not fucking with you. There was just no Eve. I remember there being 14 of us. Remember? 4 girls, 10 guys. No, I shook my head. 5 girls, 10 guys. That's how it was. Her name was Eve. She didn't talk to anyone, and neither of us ever said anything to her. You're fucking with me, and it's not funny. I could feel the panic starting to set in. I've been reading all this shit about the Mandela effect, and now you're trying to freak me out. Come on, stop. He looked annoyed now. Stop with that Mandela shit. There was no Eve. You're sleep deprived. What? I was getting upset, but also terrified. All the paranoia I had recently adopted, as I considered if the effect could be real, made me feel hopeless, insane, as Asher argued with me. I knew there was an Eve. She was at Tawas Christian with us. Her face was easily recreated in my mind. Zand, he stared at me. Are you messing with me? No, I replied, trying not to sound panicked. It was a simple situation. Asher just forgot about her. It was over a decade ago, and she wasn't a prominent student. She stayed out of every conversation, sat in the back of the class without saying a word. She only spoke when Miss Davis forced her to, and none of us initiated a conversation with her. Look, you just forgot about her. She was an introvert, a real introvert. And it's been over 10 years, it makes sense you'd forget. Maybe, he shrugged, but honestly, it's a stretch. I remember that class vividly. There were 14 students. You're delirious. Don't say that. I'm not delirious. I felt hopeless. Then what? He looked at me. Dude, this is fucked up. You know that Mandela stuff freaks me out. Please, Asher, stop, I pleaded. He looked horrified. Zen, I'm not kidding. Why are you so worked up? I think. Asher pushed his coffee mug toward me. You need to just chill for a second. Calm down. It's all right. We probably just forgot. She was with us. Asher, remember reading groups? There were 15 of us, 5 to a group. Eve was in my group. No. I mean, yeah, there were 5 to a group, but Miss Davis was in a group too, remember? No, she walked around and supervised, I argued. Asher, Eve was in my group. I know she was because every time she was forced to read, she would choke up and say nothing. And then the couple of times she did read, I was always captivated because I finally got to hear her voice, because I never had, and neither had anyone else. Asher was silent. We both knew what we had in our memory, but one of us had to be wrong, right? Dude, I begged. Her car, remember that? Her mom dressed up all nice, in a dress, always. She would pick Eve up in that fancy black car. I never cared about cars, and still don't. In my senior year of high school, I thought an Altima was a brand of car. I couldn't tell a Porsche from a Honda, but I remembered her car because it looked so nice. Maybe it was a Cadillac or something. Her mom was always the first to arrive every day, and Eve would quickly get up from her lonely corner on the bench and bolt for the car. And her mom would get out, dressed up even when it was snowing, and hug her every single time. And she always smelled good because her mom hugged her every morning and her perfume got on her. Now Asher really looked worried. Zen, he shook his head. I don't remember her. I really don't. I'm guessing you're thinking of someone else from a different school. But we've been in school together since first grade, and I honestly don't remember her. Maybe it was someone you met in preschool. No. We talked about her. She was in my reading group, in Miss Davis's class, I replied. What about after that? You're only talking about first grade. What about the other grades? I don't remember her after that. She must have moved. But she was in first grade with... Maybe that's why you forgot her. She moved and you just remember all of us graduating 5th grade there. No, I remember it clearly. She wasn't there. Miss Davis was my favorite teacher. I remember that school year easily. There was no girl named Eve. I don't really know why, but I felt like crying. Imagine that, for your whole life, you never believed in ghosts. Then you watch a horror movie or something, and there's a scene where the main character looks in the mirror, and then his reflection stops mirroring him and acts of its own accord, and it's terrifying. Afterwards, you keep thinking about that scene because it scared you, but hey, it's just a movie. It's not real. And that's the only thing that keeps you from never looking in a mirror again. But then you find out the movie was based on a true story. Okay, anyone can say that. It's based on a true story, like all horror movies are. Just because it could be real doesn't mean it island. Nothing affects you. Then it happens to you. You just got out of the shower. You're drying yourself off, and you happen to look in the mirror. You raise your towel to dry your hair, but when your reflection shows its arm, it's hanging limp and is staring at you, you're scared shitless. It's real. It happened to you, and it's undeniable. That's how I felt right now. Maybe it wasn't that specific, but I knew Eve was in that class. I remembered her like I remember how many moles are on my hand. But Asher didn't. Not one bit. It was like the bird on King Tut's burial mask, like the thinker's flimsy hand against his chin, like the footage of Nelson Mandela's big funeral in the early 90 seconds. I felt like I was going to have a panic attack. I got no studying done that day. I was too overwhelmed. I tried my hardest to put Eve in a preschool memory, but she didn't fit. She didn't fit at my old church. She didn't fit in my neighborhood growing up. She didn't fit anywhere else besides Miss Davis's first grade class. Finally, that night, I called my mom. At this point, I wasn't entirely sold on me being a victim of the Mandela effect. Part of me thought Asher had smoked too much pot in high school and just forgot about her, and I knew a way to prove my memory right. I had told my mom she wouldn't be hearing from me much this week because of all the studying I was going to be doing, which she completely respected. So she was pretty surprised when I called her. "Zen!" She sounded excited. "What's up?" "Mom, I wanted to ask you something. Do you remember a girl named Eve in Miss Davis's class? A tiny girl, blonde hair, brown eyes?" "Why the sudden question?" she replied. No, I don't. For your 7th birthday, you invited all of your friends, but I don't remember an Eve." "Yeah, I invited her, but she didn't come," I recalled. "She was really shy. Maybe that's why you forgot her. Well, I have some pictures of you from first grade. I can send them to you and you can point her out to me if you see her." "Why do you ask?" "Well, Asher doesn't remember her either. It just struck me as a little odd." I chuckled, trying to hide my anxiety. "Ah, Mom, that would be great if you sent that picture. Do you have our class photo? The one with all 14 of you?" The words hit me hard. 15, Mom. There were 15 of us. Did you forget too?" "No, I remember there being 14. "What the fuck?" I whispered. "Mom." "Yeah, send those pictures, if you could." "Okay, Zen, what's going on?" "It's a bit weird, sweetie. It's weird that no one remembers her. I don't have the class photo," she then sighed. "I wish I did. Asher's mom might. See if he can get it from her. But I'll send you the ones I do have." I tried to laugh, replying, "Okay, thanks, Mom." We talked for longer after that, but my mind was not occupied by the conversation. All I could think about was Eve. I could remember her small frame, her perfect posture, the plain dresses she wore to class. I could remember her scent, which even now sometimes resurfaces in a supermarket or in a lecture hall for a brief second, just long enough to remind me of first grade. I could remember her voice when she finally worked up the courage to read in our reading group. I could remember everything about her. I knew I would recognize her if she showed up in any of the pictures. What bothered me, though, was this. The Mandela effect is a smooth culprit. It's clever, precise, surgically so. It leaves no loose ends. The thinker, for instance, a lot of people remember taking pictures with it. They know the thinker didn't look the way it does now when they took the picture, so they go back and find the old photo album, dust it off, and reluctantly find the one of them posing with their ex-wife in front of the statue. And all that work and the discomfort of flipping through the old album is for nothing. Because in the picture, the thinker is doing exactly what they remembered it not doing. Even stranger are the viral pictures of people right in front of the statue, posing with their fists against their heads. They're right in front of the damn thing. You'd think maybe they would notice it's not doing what they thought it was and not posing correctly right in front of it. But maybe they're not complete idiots, or just simply didn't notice. Maybe when they took that picture, it was pressing its fist against its skull, and then, when the Mandela effect took place at some unknown, inexact time, the picture changed, but only the statue. It left everything else that wasn't the statue just as it was, resulting in the bizarre image of people posing incorrectly right in front of it. I knew if what I was dealing with was the Mandela effect, then there was no use in getting these pictures. Whether Eve was standing there when the picture was taken 13 years ago or not, she wouldn't be in them. The only way to catch the Mandela effect is through associated things, like the people posing incorrectly in front of the statue, and this was not associated. If the universe erased Eve from reality, then she wouldn't be in any Polaroid, but I still had to check. Maybe something would stand out. My mom sent 4 pictures. The first was of me, Asher, Brian Reed, Hees, and Norman playing in the mud. The second was also unhelpful. Just me and Asher sitting at a picnic table during an open house. The third, however, was interesting. It was the Christmas concert. All 15 of us were taught 3 church songs to sing at the concert, and our parents came to watch. It was a humiliation for all of us, except maybe Aaron, who was born a star. But it was especially embarrassing for Eve. This picture jogged my memory instantly, and what made it strange was the lineup of the girls in the picture. You could see all of us on stage. There was a riser on the stage, and some of us stood on it, while others stood in front on the stage. On the left were the boys, 5 in front and 5 on the riser. On the right were the girls, 3 in front and 1 on the riser in between 2 of the girls, looking as if someone was missing from the picture. Erin was on the left, then Amy next to her, then Elizabeth next to her, and then Grayson was on the riser between Erin and Amy. Eve would have fit perfectly between Amy and Elizabeth. Why put only 3 girls on the stage and 1 girl by herself on the riser? It was unbalanced, especially when the boys were in a perfect formation. It didn't make sense. And I remembered Eve being there that night, how scared she was. I remembered her white dress and thinking that, for the first time, we were all dressed like her, and she didn't stand out. And I remember her crying backstage, and being terrified to go out, and not singing a single word, but just standing perfectly still. I would bet my soul that all of that happened. The last picture was useless as well, just me and Brian Reed during a game of tag we played on the last day of school. Brian Reed was trying to tag me out, and I was running like hell for first base. I saved the Christmas concert picture to my phone. It was the proof I needed to show Asher. The next day, when I met up with Asher, I showed him the picture. To my surprise, this actually affected him. He seemed worried as he began to consider how odd the picture looked. He said that if I had brought up Eve now after we had seen the picture, he would just think it was a coincidence. But since I brought up Eve before we saw it, that made it much weirder. Still, he wasn't ready to believe in the Mandela effect, not like I was, but he was curious enough to ask his mom if she had the class photo, and she did. We both waited for her text in suspense. I couldn't remember anything about the photo, yet I still wanted to see if there was the same strange arrangement of students as in the Christmas concert, and so did Asher. When the text came through, we both trembled with anticipation. The second I saw it, I gasped. "See?" I shouted. "The bee sting!" Asher jumped in surprise at my outburst. "Asher," I grabbed him. "See how we're standing? It was because of Eve." Miss Davis stood in the middle, us 7 on the left and 7 on the right. Those on the left were turned slightly toward her, so the left side of their faces showed, and the right was obscured. Those on the right were turned to their left, so the right side of their faces was toward the photographer. What stood out was the vast, empty space in the photo. When a group of people poses this way, it's a way to shrink the size of the group. Often, a photographer has trouble fitting everyone in frame, and so they form this shape so they can squeeze in and still look natural. But in this picture, it was easy to see we had more than enough room to stand properly and still have space. That wasn't why we were standing like that. "Asher, I feel like I've struck gold. We were standing like this because Eve got stung by a bee. Man, tell me you remember that." We were about to get our picture taken, and Eve got stung right under her right eye. Her face swelled up, and she was crying because she didn't want to look like that in the picture. So the photographer told us to stand like that, and Eve could turn the left side of her face to the camera. "Dude," Asher scratched his head. "We were just standing like that to save room." "No, we weren't." There was no reason to. There's so much room on the left and right. It's not even natural. We wouldn't have done that for that reason. I don't remember that happening. I really don't. Honestly, this is starting to freak me out. I think we should just drop it. "I can't drop it," I replied. "She was real. I can't believe no one remembers her." There was only one last option for me. I had to get a reunion together with them. If we all met up and someone else remembered Eve, I would know I wasn't crazy. Most of us hadn't talked in years. I had Erin on Facebook, though. She talked all the time about getting a reunion together, now that we were in our 20s, and I knew if I mentioned it, she would eagerly organize it. That night, I contacted her, and she was all for it. We were all about to go on winter break after finals, and I suggested we meet back in Tawas City. I was going to be there anyway, to visit my family for Christmas. My mom had long suggested I have the reunion at her house, saying she would be honored to host and would take care of the food. When I told Erin this, she couldn't have been happier. She promised she would contact the others. "All 15 of us," she said. My heart pounded. "All 15? "Yeah," she replied. "All 15 of us and Miss Davis." And just like that, I felt another wave of fear. Erin had always been the one to try and keep the group together. For her to have forgotten Eve meant something was truly wrong. December 18th came. I was amazed as I drove down my old road. I hadn't been back here in years. Usually for Christmas, my parents would come down to Tallahassee to visit me. Not that I had anything against them, I just hated Tawas City during Christmas. It was so cold, and most of its residents went south for the winter if they could afford it. It was a ghost town, and a frozen one. My parents picked me up from the airport and drove me here. On the way, I reminisced as we drove past the frozen cornfields under the bleak, gray-white sky. I felt like I was just here yesterday. Nothing was different. Everything was completely familiar. Maybe the only difference was some of the old buildings looked even older, more decrepit and abandoned. The whole trip, and especially when I got to my house before anyone else arrived, really, all I thought about was Eve. I felt closer to her in this forgotten town. Back in the snow, which I hadn't felt in years, I felt like she was within my grasp. I knew that if I was to find peace, it would be at this reunion. If just one other person remembered her, then I wasn't crazy. Then, the Mandela effect was real, and Eve was real, and Asher was wrong. God, I prayed for that peace. By 4 p.m., everyone who could make it had arrived. Unfortunately, Miss Davis was busy with her family because her father was dying, and they didn't know how long he had left, and Norman was completely unreachable. The last any of us had heard from him was Brian Reed, who remembered Norman getting into some trouble around 8th grade and having to go to juvenile detention. After that, he pretty much vanished. Unlike Eve, he still appeared in the photos. People still remembered his name. When the other 12 arrived at the house, I forgot about Eve for a moment. It was great to see Erin again. She was still as beautiful and energetic as ever. Tyler Mahoney was just as handsome. Brian Reed had joined the Navy and was on leave, and he was even bigger than before. Grayson, on the other hand, had not been kind to time. Zach looked exactly as I remembered. Amy was unrecognizable, now with bright blue hair. Elizabeth was the same, quiet and sweet. Zealand looked nothing like we thought he would, now charming, tall, and with a scruffy beard. George and Jordan looked completely different now. George was a construction worker and was buff and rugged. Jordan was the opposite, more quiet and ironically taller than his twin. Taz was still as goofy as ever. Asher and I were generally unchanged, but the joy of seeing my friends was only a momentary distraction. Soon, my thoughts returned to Eve. I waited for her to walk in the door, but I knew she never would. I waited for someone to mention her, but I knew that would never happen. With Miss Davis and Norman accounted for, everyone was here. That deflated me. After dinner, we all went into the living room to talk. I tried to enjoy myself, but something was wrong. Eve should have been there. It bothered me that no one asked about her, and I knew I had to bring her up, but I didn't want to make myself out to be crazy. Asher had told me not to bring her up, and I didn't want to disturb him. I also wasn't ready to hear that they did remember her. What would I do then? I wouldn't be paranoid, but then what? The horror of trying to accept what happened to her, that would be nearly impossible. I longed to hear someone say she was real, but I didn't know how I could ever forget her if I had to actually imagine the universe forgetting her, bumping into another dimension and pulling her out of the snowstorm of Tawas City into somewhere else, light years away, mostly the same except for a few odd things. I wanted to stay quiet. I wanted to just forget about her, but I knew that was impossible. I didn't know what worried me more, the Mandela effect taking place so close to my life, or me being paranoid. Either way, I had to know. I couldn't hold it in any longer. "Hey guys," I said nervously. I need to ask you all a question." Asher looked disappointed. "What's up, Zen?" Brian Reed asked. "Look, this might sound weird, but where's Eve?" "I was just thinking the same thing," Tyler Mahoney spoke up, and my heart stopped. I wasn't crazy. Someone else remembered her, but no one else did. An awkward silence consumed the room. Asher looked like he'd just seen a ghost. I myself was terrified and at the same time overcome with relief. "Eve?" Aaron asked. "Come on, I don't remember them." "Her," Tyler replied. "The short blonde girl who always wore a dress." "Holy shit," Aaron muttered, confused. "Holy shit, am I missing something?" "There was a girl named Eve in our first grade class," I spoke up, "but no one remembers her. At least I thought no one did." I chuckled nervously. "But Tyler, you do. Man, I thought I was losing my mind. She's not in any of the pictures. Not one. No trace of her existence besides my memory, and I swore I was going crazy. But Tyler, you remember her too. That puts me so much more at ease." "There was no Eve," Dylan replied. "I don't remember an Eve. I remember every one of you guys clearly. I can't imagine why I would completely forget one of you and remember the rest so clearly." "Me too," Jordan chimed in. "There were 4 girls. I remember that easily, not a 5th. "There was," Tyler replied. "It felt so good to be relieved. I had a crush on her, remember? Not to sound like an ass, but all you girls had a crush on me." He looked around, and no one could deny it. "But then I had a crush on Eve. And the note?" I burst out laughing, remembering it instantly. "Yeah," Tyler laughed. The room was oddly silent. "I had a crush on Eve," Tyler chuckled. No one knew why. I liked her because she was all quiet and distant, but I was obsessed with her. So I wrote her this super cheesy and embarrassing note, and I was going to give it to her. "And you got caught," I finished, just wanting to see it all connect again. "And Miss Davis took it, and everyone wanted to know what it said because when she read it, she started cracking up. And it was the most embarrassing day of my life," Tyler grinned. "You guys don't remember that?" Most everyone looked uncomfortable. I don't remember an Eve," Elizabeth said for certain. "I don't remember that name ever." "I don't remember that day you're talking about, and we definitely would have giggled about you," she smiled, but looked worried. "We all did. I think we would have remembered that." "It happened," Tyler shrugged. "How could Zen and I both remember the same thing, the exact same thing, and it not be real? And why did everyone remember the thinker confidently placing his fist against its head, when in reality his loose fingers were plunged into his chest? And why did everyone remember King Tut's burial mask having only a snake on top, when there had always been a bright, prominent bird right next to it? And why did everyone remember Nelson Mandela's grim fate in a squalid South African prison, resulting in severe civil unrest, along with vividly recorded footage of his widely broadcasted funeral and his widow's tearful eulogy when he passed, when none of it ever happened? It was because something terrifying and unimaginable had happened, something none of us could explain. Something that turned the thinker's determined fist into a pose of indecision, created the unnatural bird like a mole on King Tut's burial mask, and turned Nelson Mandela into the Walking Dead without anyone noticing until he died again in 2013. leaving those of us who remembered differently utterly bewildered. "Well, that's just weird." Aaron's words were the catharsis the room was looking for. Whether Eve's existence or non-existence meant anything, no one could deny that it was, indeed, weird. After that, we changed the subject, and most seemed to forget about the puzzle rather quickly, but I didn't. It gnawed at me for the rest of the evening. I wanted to sit and talk with Tyler about Eve all night. I wanted to hear all the stories he remembered about her. I was dying to ask him if he remembered the bee sting story, but it was never brought up again. I couldn't ask. I didn't want to think about it anymore. It gave me a feeling I couldn't explain, to imagine that poor little girl getting stung in the eye, crying her heart out before picture day in our desolate, snowy town. The memory alone made me shiver. That poor girl, turning the left side of her puffy face to the camera. Where was she now? Why did no one remember her? I tried my best to just forget, but Eve lingered in my mind. I knew I would never forget her. The Mandela effect was real. She truly had existed, and now she didn't. So what the hell happened to her? It was truly terrifying to think about, and I couldn't forget no matter how desperately I tried. Asher seemed to be in the same boat as me. Most of them stayed at my house overnight, since there were no motels in the whole town, and most of our parents had moved. The next day, everyone but me left town, flying back to the land of the living. I alone remained in the snowy wasteland of Tawas City, Michigan. I alone remained in this hot spot of the universe, where two realities collided. I did not find the peace I wanted at the reunion. We all exchanged numbers and kept in touch from then on. That was nice. But above all, I was constantly haunted by thoughts of Eve. I just wanted something to make sense. I stayed up late at night, thinking about her voice, which I could easily recall, reading us, "There is a bird on your head," and Max's words. I remembered her being terrified at social events and bundled up in the snow, still in a dress despite her mittens and scarf, walking toward her mother where they would embrace outside the sleek black car. I remembered Eve crying when she got stung in the eye. That memory, for some reason, bothered me more than the others. It just got to me. Something about it really cut into my heart. She was so innocent, and I felt so terribly for her. And now she was not a victim of a simple bee sting, but of some horrific cosmic event that left her non-existent. My parents wanted me to stay until Christmas, but the thought alone was numbing. I did not want to spend a week in this desolate town. I hated this place, and now I was terrified here. Could I be ripped from my reality and lost in the universe? It had happened here before. This mystery haunted this town, drowning it and constantly reminding me of Eve, the girl who ceased to exist. The days passed, and all I did was sit in the living room and watch TV. I liked seeing my parents when they were home, but they both worked, so I spent a lot of time alone in the house, which I hated. Finally, I went through my old closet to find something from first grade. I found nothing. I did, however, hold in my hands the picture Eve was erased from, the one where she was supposed to be standing between Elizabeth and Amy, but wasn't. She wasn't there, and there was just that weird space in between, the cruel universe. It was so smug, so omnipotent, that it could leave such obvious clues like this, and yet there was still no way to prove she was real. But then on Christmas Eve, it happened. I got a text from Tyler. Zen. I've been reading about the Mandela effect. It's messing with my head. I think that's what happened. But now I remember something. And it might actually prove Eve was real. The note I wrote her. You stole it. You took it from Miss Davis's desk and gave it back to me. But then I told you to keep it and throw it away. Then you told me you didn't, and that you took it home and showed it to your parents and cracked up every time you read it. Where is it? If you still have it, it's proof. Holy shit, I said as I read the text. Holy shit. You're absolutely right, Tyler. I'm gonna find that note. I swear I will, and when I do, I'll send it to you, and we'll prove she was real. Now I know what some of you are thinking. Wouldn't the note cease to exist? No. See, when the Mandela effect happens, only things directly related to what was changed are altered. That's why the people posing in front of the thinker's statue are still posing incorrectly. That's why the cartoons where King Tut's mask has a snake and no bird still look that way. Only the actual artifact is changed. So, the actual pictures of Eve, they were gone. She was erased from them, and there was no trace of her left. But if I found that note, it would be the proof I needed. It would mention her by name. My dad said I could look in the storage unit, that the note was definitely there. He'd put a lot of the stuff I didn't clean out of my closet growing up in there, and if it was anywhere, it would be there. I even vaguely remembered stealing it, being a little shit, and reading it every once in a while for a laugh. Part of me wanted to wait until my dad got off work to go to the storage unit with him, but I knew, somehow, that I would never find the note if he was there. I had a feeling I had to do this alone. I drove there through the snow on a bleak and quiet day like every other in Tawas. I passed the lonely cornfields, the towering silos, the vacant fish shops, and the frozen marina. Everything was just as it was. When I got to the storage unit, I was strangely terrified. I felt like I was about to enter a haunted house. As a kid, the storage unit always scared me. For my entire life, I'm pretty sure I had never seen another person in that building besides my dad. It was always dark and empty, and now without him by my side, looking for a note about a ghost, I was scared shitless. But I went on. I walked into the cold, vast metal hallways, going further inside and turning on the lights as I entered each new corridor. Finally, I reached my unit. I dreaded lifting the door. It made a terrifying screech. Hearing it made me feel uneasy, even though I was the one making the noise. I lifted it as gently as I could, which was not very gently, and began to search. I searched for over an hour. I could barely reach the boxes in the back, and each one was filled with junk, usually with a couple of book lice. But then I found it. My baseball card collection. These were from first grade. They were in a plastic box, almost obscured by the junk they were under. But I pulled the box out, pulling it from the mold and into my hands. I opened the box, and inside were the baseball cards. A Berenstain Bears book. How odd. And with an A, of course. Some scribbled drawings in old notebooks, and a folded-up note. I recognized it instantly. I held it in my hands. Here, in this cold, quiet, lonely storage unit, I caressed a piece of evidence the universe forgot. I opened the old piece of paper, barely able to breathe as I searched for the name. I opened it to Eve. That's all I needed to read. To Eve, to Eve, to Eve. I folded it back up. I stuffed it in my pocket. I took a long, deep breath, leaning against a dusty stack of boxes. Eve was real. The girl who ceased to exist was really here, in this town of tombs, and I was not crazy. And somehow, two universes had collided, and Eve was ripped into oblivion by the silver fingers of the universe, sucked from existence without a trace left. Except for my memory, Tyler's memory, and the note in my hand. What happened to her? Where was she now? Was she still alive? Where was that tiny, sweet, weepy girl? And would I ever know? Probably not. She was in a place where Curious George has a tail and children grow up with the Berenstain Bears. She was taught that Nelson Mandela died in a South African prison, and when she pretended to be the thinker, she did not pose incorrectly, I hope. Or maybe she was nothing now. Maybe the universe had made a catastrophic mistake, and that harmless girl would never again be swooped into her mother's loving arms, but instead spend eternity floating through the multiverse, trapped in the gray snow. I didn't know. But as I sat there, all I could do was imagine her ghost sitting with me. I felt close to her in this place that time forgot, in that meaningless metal room, trapped in a town where the universe had made a mistake. When I flew back to Tallahassee, I couldn't have been more relieved. I swore I would never return to Tawa City, Michigan, for any reason. As far as I was concerned, the place was better left behind, just as Eve had been. But as always, I couldn't escape her. I sent Asher and Tyler the picture of the note. They were both inescapably dumbfounded. Still, we all tried to put it behind us. Then Miss Davis updated her Facebook. "So sorry I couldn't make it to the reunion," she posted. "But I just wanted to say I will definitely be at the next one for my favorite class ever." She also posted a picture, a drawing from Elizabeth. It was a drawing of the whole class. Clearly an amateur, simple, messy drawing by a child in crayon. But for its simplicity, there was nothing normal about it. It was a drawing of 10 boys and a drawing of 5 girls. A drawing of a short, blonde, brown-eyed girl in what could only be distinguished as a dress. I don't know how the others reacted, but I know I will never forget that image. Even now, all these years later, she still crosses my mind sometimes. I can't help it. I have seen terrible and inexplicable things in my life. 2 towers destroyed by hijacked planes for no reason other than pure hatred, leaving thousands dead. A preschool invaded by an armed gunman using military tactics who slaughtered small children unprovoked by anything at all, but nothing. Nothing has ever affected me like Eve, the girl the universe forgot.